Welcome to Juneteenth in Hawaii. We have a distinguished panel who will discuss Juneteenth, its meaning, and historians and lawmakers as to why we should celebrate Juneteenth and some of the events which will occur on June 19th in honor of Juneteenth. I want to first show you some flags. Nathan, if you could bring up the flags. The first flag is red, black, and green. Red for the blood and the struggle, black for the color of our people, green for the land, and symbol of hope, liberated future, which Black heroes spoke. This was actually a flag which Marcus Garvey brought when he came to America. He's from Jamaica originally, and he came to America, and his theme was to uplift people, uplift you mighty people. And this was during the 1920s, and that was during Jim Crow and a lot of segregation. And he formed an organization for which Malcolm X's parents were a part of, the American Negro Association. And this was the African Liberation Flag. It was used in many Juneteenth celebrations until there actually became another Juneteenth flag. So I had to pay homage to the red, black, and green. And sometimes you'll see it when you travel, especially in the mainland, you'll see people have this flag in their yard, or if there's a Juneteenth celebration, they'll have the flag there. Next flag is the Juneteenth flag. It's a fairly recent flag, but the star represents Texas because Juneteenth occurred in Galveston, Texas during, during 1865. The proclamation, Emancipation Proclamation by President Lincoln occurred 2 years earlier. The proclamation freed all slaves in southern states in the United States, but people in Texas did not get the word until June 19th, 2 years later. And so this flag has the red, white, and blue, and the star in the middle, which represents Texas, where finally African Americans who were enslaved became aware that they were free. And thus, this is the Juneteenth flag, which is being used in a lot of Juneteenth celebrations on the mainland. Juneteenth, you can take the flag away, thank you. Juneteenth is celebrated and recognized in 48 states. Hawaii will become the 49th state. At least we're not last. South Dakota would be last, but 49, that's better than 50. And so all other states besides South Dakota recognize and celebrate Juneteenth. And it is scheduled to be signed, the bill is scheduled to be signed June 16th next week by the governor. It has already passed the House and the Senate. And we're going to talk to some of the panelists who were instrumental in getting this bill passed. First of all, I want to call upon Dr. Akiemi Glenn. And first of all, I'd like her to tell us who she is, a little bit about herself, and the importance of Juneteenth. Dr. Glenn.
Hello, Daphne. I want to thank you for the invitation to be a part of this conversation today. And I want to say thank you to all of the wonderful panelists who are going to be sharing their mana'o this afternoon as well. And thank you for the invitation to tell a little bit about myself. I'll keep it very brief. My name is Akiemi Glenn, and I am the founder and executive director of the Polo Project. We're a small community organization, one of many Black serving organizations here in Hawaii. And our mission is for us to rethink and redefine what it means for us to be Black here by cultivating connections to ourselves, our communities, our ancestors in the land. And so for the past few years that we've been in operation, celebrating Juneteenth has been an important part of creating some of those connections. And we're not the only group that's hosted Juneteenth events over the last few years. I'm sure we'll hear from other people on this panel who have been a part of decades-long celebrations here.
And tell us what Juneteenth means to you.
Sure. Well, as Daphne mentioned, Juneteenth is the celebration of enslaved people in Galveston, Texas, finally getting the word. And it's important that, often we frame this in kind of a passive format where they just kind of heard that it was happening. Juneteenth refers to the delivery of General Order 3, where the Union Army was finally able to reach Galveston. And it's not that The people who were enslaving them didn't know that the Emancipation Proclamation had been issued. And it's not that they didn't know that the war had ended in April of that year. They were trying to eke out the last little bit of value they could from enslaved people that they were holding in captivity. And this was the last possible moment that they could. And immediately afterwards, people were celebrating. They were looking to find their families. They were looking to find loved ones who'd been separated from them. And they did all the things that any human would do. They were looking for connection. They were celebrating this milestone. And they also knew that this wasn't the end of their struggle, that enslavement was a centuries-long institution, but there was a lot that needed to change in the culture for them to be truly free. And so the commemoration of Juneteenth by those people immediately after General Order 3 was read, and in the years following in Texas, spread across the South, where I grew up myself. And as a young person growing up in Virginia primarily, and North Carolina, it was very important for me to have a day. We had so few days that recognized the impact of enslavement on our folks and on our community and on our country at large. And so Juneteenth for me was always a really important time. It was one of the very few times that there was any recognition or conversation about the impact enslavement had had on us, but it was also really crucially a time for us to be celebrating and for us to be uplifting the humanity of our community and each other. So as a young person, I remember looking forward to that. And it was the beginning of cookout season and the beginning of getting to see aunties and uncles and people that we didn't get to see during the year. And it was a really important thing. I think for us in Hawaii, Juneteenth is equally as important as it was for me as a young person growing up in Virginia, because it's an opportunity for us in this holiday and this observance to be visible and as a community to celebrate the fact that our ancestors achieved this milestone, whether we are descendants of people from Galveston, Texas, or people who were enslaved in Jamaica, or people who are enslaved anywhere on this planet. It's a milestone. And it's also a reminder to us that in an instant, an entrenched institution like enslavement, which lasted for centuries, can change. And there's an opportunity for us to celebrate our milestones on the path to freedom, but also to recognize that General Order 3 was not the end of struggles for people of African descent in North America or around the world. And I often like to remind people that here in the Pacific, 1865 is also a banner year because that's the beginning of the intensive practice that is euphemistically called blackbirding, where Pacific Islanders were also enslaved as American sugar and cotton plantations tried to move into the Pacific. And so I think Juneteenth is a reminder for all of us while we celebrate that none of us are truly free until all of us are free.
Thank you. Are there any specific Juneteenth celebrations going on next week that you know of that you could share with us?
Sure, there are several organizations who are doing Juneteenth events, and I'd be happy to direct folks to our website or our social media. We're trying to amplify all the things that folks have going on, and maybe some of the other panelists can talk about events that they'll be a part of. But our organization is going to start the day next Saturday, knowing that there are lots of things happening in the afternoon. We're going to start our morning together at Kapiolani Park with a collective kind of protocol and ceremony to honor ancestors. We invite people to come and wear white and bring things that they would like to add to our collective altar. And we'll be close to the sea, and we'd love to see you all there.
Thank you. All right, moving forward to our next expert, who's the youngest one on the panel, Samantha Neyland, who is also 2020 Miss Hawaii. Would you introduce yourself?
Yes, hi, I'm Samantha Neyland. I am Miss Hawaii USA 2020 and the founder of the Hawaii for Juneteenth Coalition.
Tell us about the coalition.
Absolutely. The coalition started at my kitchen table. In June of 2020, learned that Hawaii, in fact, was one of, at the time, 4 states that had not recognized Juneteenth. And I felt so embarrassed for my state because I know that we stand for diversity and we celebrate all people. And I didn't want us to be known as one of the only ones who wasn't recognizing Juneteenth. So I really didn't know how much it was going to take, but I committed to making that change because I really feel that the educational value behind recognizing Juneteenth is monumental in itself. You can't impact the future if you don't understand the past. And I know growing up, I did not learn about Juneteenth. I think I learned about 3 years ago for the first time. It was the first time I'd ever heard about it. And, you know, to me, that was something that I felt like, okay, there's probably a lot of other people who haven't learned about this. And it, in a time when we're talking about systemic racism, and there were people who, you know, didn't believe systemic racism was a problem or that it didn't exist. I just felt like Juneteenth was such a perfect example of systemic racism and how it can affect so many people for so many years to come and in the future. And, you know, looking at our past often helps us understand what's going on today. So with all of that, I wrote an advocacy letter and actually started with Tommy Waters, who is on our panel today, because he had actually introduced the resolution in Honolulu that had just passed, introducing or establishing Juneteenth as a holiday in the city and county of Honolulu. So I met with him and we talked all about it, and he gave me some great advice. And from there, I just kept reaching out. I talked to Alphonso and gathered community support, and eventually reached out to Senator Wakai and Representative Mizuno to introduce our bills in the 2021 legislative session.
Good. What did you find? Did you find any obstacles in your way in getting this legislation passed? What were they?
Of course, there's always going to be obstacles. There's always challenges. I often use the metaphor running a marathon, because I felt like I was running a marathon. You're running and you just keep going and you keep going. I mean, it goes on forever. And sometimes the wind smacks you in the face. Sometimes you trip over your own shoelaces. I mean, there were so many challenges. One of our biggest ones was the committee hearing deadlines. We had a Senate bill and a House bill, and our House bill died, unfortunately, relatively early in the process because it wasn't scheduled for a committee hearing in time. A deadline had passed and we just missed it, and then that was it. Simply because lack of scheduling, our bill died. So there were so many moments like that where we really just had to pay so much attention and make sure we were always on it, because one little misstep and that was it. We'd have to wait until next year.
Okay. So how did you revive it? Or
fortunately, we had the Senate bill. So fortunately, when the House bill died, we still had our Senate bill, which was going strong. And we just really pulled every resource. I mean, I called everyone I knew and said, you have to call all of these committee members and tell them to vote yes on our bill. This is so important. And I did it for every single hearing, every single one, because I mean, you just can't take anything for granted. We never wanted to assume that we were just good, because that's what we did with the House bill. I thought, oh, it's fine. It's gonna get scheduled, it'll be voted on, and everything will be great. No, that didn't happen. So I did not make that mistake twice.
Oh, good for you for standing straight and forward and moving on. I really appreciate that, you know. So my understanding is that the bill is finally going to be signed by the governor.
Yes,
Tell us about that.
This Wednesday, the governor is going to sign SB 939 into law. And we're so excited. I mean,
Wonderful.
Excited feels like an understatement, because it's long overdue, but I also just feel so proud that our state is taking this step.
That's right. It's 49, but it's not 50.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Let's well, thank you very much for sharing that.
Thank you.
I'd like to talk to Senator Wakai if I know I saw him earlier. Senator?
Daphne, I'm still here.
Oh, wonderful. Okay, I'm going to ask you, of course, the next question is, how did you get it passed and what did you think when you first saw it? And thank you very much.
Oh, sure. I mean, Daphne, thank you for moderating. It's so wonderful to be with like-minded, good-hearted people here. And, you know, there's two reasons why I kind of stepped forward in this for this particular bill. First was the importance, and I'm going to let other people talk about the significance of the day. But the second was, I really enjoyed talking to Samantha, and I really believe in empowering the youth. And Samantha got this across the goal line. Who knows what's next for her? If we don't believe in our youth, we're not going to get the society that we want in the future. So that was another pivotal movement for me to say, sure, Samantha, I would be happy to introduce your bill and help you marshal it through. And, you know, looking at it from a political perspective on how difficult it is, keep in mind that only 8% of the bills that are introduced in January ever become law. 92% year after year, 92% of the bills die. And unfortunately for Samantha, 2020, it was part of the 92% that died. And COVID was probably one of the biggest reasons, right? We had a lot of good ideas that we had to just shove to the side because we really had to focus last legislative session on COVID type bills. And I think to her credit, she didn't give up, right? The marathon, a lot of times people get into the legislative process and think it's a sprint. They don't get it across the finish line and then they give up. But Samantha saw that it was a marathon and that she learned what she did in 2020 and took a different approach, rallied more troops to be behind her, and she was lucky enough to be the 8% that got it through this year. And what was also, I think, different this year than last year was that she rallied all of you on this call, plus all of your friends who believed in the value of Juneteenth being recognized in the state of Hawaii. And so it was really a collective effort. And for those who want to get like a quick lesson in politics 101, you need two things to happen to get a bill to be one of the 8%. One is you need to have advocates within. So luckily, I have my pal John Mizuno in the House of Representatives, because it can't just be all senators, it can't be all representatives, it's got to be an advocate on both sides. So you need that. But you still, even if John and I thought this is the greatest thing since sliced bread, can't get it across the finish line ourselves. We need the community support, which is where all of you come in. And sometimes you have a lot of community support, you don't have an advocate inside, and things don't happen. So magically, Samantha pulled it all together, found the right folks to be advocates inside, got all of you to be the advocates from outside, and lo and behold, we have a bill that's going to be signed by the governor next week. So kudos really to Samantha for really grabbing onto this issue, rallying all of us. And we all believed in her. And it was a wonderful community effort led by Samantha.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you. Representative Mizuno, are you on?
Yeah. Hi, Daphne. Hello.
Hello, how are you? I know you're very busy, so thank you for coming.
Great to see you again. I still remember our days back at the Hawaii Civil Rights Commission, and
I know.
fond memories. Great to see you again, friend.
Thanks. Well, we're talking about Juneteenth and how it became a law in Hawaii and soon to be signed by the governor. And I know you played a big part in this as well. Would you talk about what you did and your experience?
Sure. It was a complete team effort. And like my good friend said, Senator Wakai, we really needed to work together. Some of the names, in addition to Senator Wakai, Daniel DeGracia, he's a civil beat writer and he works for the Department of Health. He really played a pivotal role in moving this legislation to the finish line. Samantha, Daniel, and Senator Wakai and I, we were texting, emailing. It got kind of dicey when the Senate bill crossed over, because we noticed Representative Gates from the International Affairs, Culture and the Arts Committee did not yet schedule it. We got a little worried. We got memos to him, and he did a great job. He heard it, passed it with a few days extra. And then the next question was, will Judiciary Hawaiian Affairs hear it? And if they do, will the final committee, Finance, hear it and pass it? And it did work out. It was, I will not lie, did get a little dicey. Senator Wakai kept us at ease. He said, I know the next two chairs also. I'll send out a memo and maybe we can all do the same. So yes, it was a team effort. Keep in mind now, Hawaii, as diverse as we are, with the Aloha spirit, the Rainbow Coalition and all, unbeknownst to a lot of us, they think we don't have discrimination. Why do we need this bill? I mean, it's a head scratcher. We all understand the significance of Juneteenth and what it means also to civil rights and to humanity. We get that. And so, unfortunately, because we're so diverse here, we probably kind of lost that. One other thing I wanted to shout out to is when we talk about the ending of slavery, when we talk about civil rights and justice for all, people still think that there is no discrimination in Hawaii because we have so many different races, ethnicities, cultures. That's not true. Now, if people in your heart of heart think about it, going to talk about Pacific Islanders that are discriminated against. And this is our micronations, Chukis, Marshallese. It's unfortunate. And, you know, I'm just saying that we need to call a spade and be honest. Hawaii is a beautiful place, it's a melting pot, but we do have examples of racism, and we still have the fight and struggle that we need to continue. But with that said, again, Councilmember Waters did a great job at passing a resolution which provided some momentum. Senator Wakai just did a great job at being a general and making sure this crossed the finish line. Sam was just incredible. She was the person that collaborated with everybody and got everybody united. And again, Daniel Negracia from Civil Beat and Department of Health, he did a great job, yeoman's work in getting this bill passed. And I'm just so honored. And this means so much more to people. You're going to have people that have been discriminated against because of their age, their race, their national origin, their sexual orientation, people from the LGBTQ community. This represents all of them and says that discrimination, racism, and hate does not belong in our society. And it's affecting so much more. It affects all of humanity. And that's why we're so proud to finally move this most important piece of legislation through the state of Hawaii. But thank you for having me, and
Wonderful.
for so many people helping us in this great endeavor.
Did you find very much opposition?
No. Interestingly enough, it's kind of it's not opposition. It's the fact that people thought we're on cruise control. This is Hawaii. It's not like this. It's not like the mainland. We don't have that kind of hate or discrimination or disdain. And I won't mention who, but that's kind of like the mindset. And I said, wait, no, guys, it's not like that. All forms is wrong. And we don't want to be the only state in the union not to recognize this day. Come on. So
Really, like Martin Luther King, remember how hard that was to get that holiday?
Go figure, right? So sometimes, again, with Hawaii being so diverse, and there are people thinking, we've got a beautiful place that we live in, and there's nothing of that sort of nature. That's not exactly true. And you have to pass something like this, not only symbolically to show that you're collaborated, you're united, you're part of the United States, and we see the importance of this. So yes, I think it was because people thought it wasn't a problem that we had to bring it to their attention and say, this is important, this is significant, and it's more than symbolic. And with great leaders like Waters and Senator Wakai, Sam, and all the others that joined in for the fight, we're able to do that. So it was really a team effort. Daphne, thank you. Alphonso, everybody out there, we know you, we love you. This was a great all-around team effort and a win for all of us.
Well, thank you so much. Is Tommy Waters on?
Aloha, everyone.
Aloha.
I'm coming to you live from Kapiolani Park with
All
my
right.
daughter.
Hello.
Aloha.
Aloha.
Hey,
Well,
just a quick shout out to everyone and a congratulations to everyone, but especially Senator Wakai and Representative Mizuno and Samantha, really, and Daphne for your hard work. I mean, like Senator Wakai and Representative Mizuno said, it wasn't easy, and you gotta be diligent and work at it to get legislation passed. And I'm just so happy to celebrate this day with you all. We did pass at the City Council Resolution 20-154, and folks came out and testified, and it was so heartwarming to hear folks testify about how important this is. And it was really a good opportunity to educate folks on the importance of June 19th. It really, really was, because there's so many people who don't know. They just don't know what happened. And it was wonderful. Once again, aloha. I saw Judge Simms online, and aloha, Judge. Good to see you. We miss you. But I just want to once again congratulate everybody. This is such a great thing. Aloha.
Just so you know, Maui did pass it last year. The mayor signed it for Juneteenth, and I was really pleased to hear about that. So shout out to anybody from Maui who's on this. I think a couple of them might be on, but so now Honolulu and the whole state is with it. That's wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, before we get to Alfonso, I just want to read you a portion of the Senate bill. The purpose of this act is to establish June 19th of each year as Juneteenth in recognition of the history and legacy of slavery in the United States and in honor of the significant roles and contributions of African Americans in the history of the United States. So the way the bill is written, it just really gets right to the point. So thank you again. Have a enjoy your day at Kapiolani Park. Alfonso.
Yes, Daphne, thank you so very much.
Tell us who you are and who you represent, and then go into Juneteenth.
So first of all, I'm Alphonso Brages. I am the president for the NAACP here in Hawaii, and I'm very, very honored to represent all of you all at the national level on the board of directors. And so I'm grateful to Daphne and others for this opportunity to share a little bit with you today on Juneteenth. And I think that it is important for us to understand how we got here and why it's important for us to do more than just have a family get together, a little barbecue, or a day off, as most folks would like to relegate this to. Understanding that the Juneteenth is to the African American as the 4th of July is to all Americans with respect to freedom and our liberties and things. I think it's also important that we understand what was the significance of June the 19th, 1865. As previously mentioned, this was when the message got to the folks in Texas that, hey, we had been set free. And although it was a late arrival, you know, as Dr. Glenn alluded to, that the intent was really to suppress the economic value of preserving slavery. And I think that it's important for us to know that, because unless we understand what were some of the nuances for holding us where we were, we don't necessarily understand how we can best celebrate the freedom that comes with slavery being abolished. States like Delaware and Kentucky were still had slaves going on. And I would urge us to go back and look at in 1852, I believe it was, Frederick Douglass gave a great speech about the significance of the 4th of July to the African American or to the Blacks here in America. And so I would urge us to go back, read that speech, and see, is there any correlation between the points that he raised then and the points that we need to raise now and have been raising with respect to the celebration. Celebration, to me, is not just a call for us to pause in our workflow, our activities, and just have some fun time. To me, celebration really and truly, as the declaration that the proclamation and the law that the governor is going to sign out, really is about how do we preserve our rich legacy? How do we ensure that future generations honor the commitments and the tremendous sacrifices that we now enjoy? And so it is about preserving our cultural pride. And when I say that, as my t-shirt says, cultural pride really is about being unapologetically Black. And there's no shame in it. James Brown said it best, I'm Black and I'm proud. So what does it mean to be proud, though? It's got to be more than words. It has to be your actions to engage such that your contribution emboldens and embraces in harmony the entire society. And when we honor and celebrate those contributions of African Americans, we can celebrate diversity. We appreciate what diversity was. It means that we are truly committed to our future generations, and that we will educate them, that we will empower them. And when we do that, guess what? We have such outstanding results. Look at what happened when Samantha felt emboldened and empowered to move forward something that was important to her. She saw a need in this state, and she saw not only just for her local community, but what could the state benefit from by us having this piece of legislation move all the way past the governor's desk. So because of that empowerment, and thank you to all who did support and empower this young leader, look at what happened. And she's not a singular example. She is but one and a modern day example of what happened. The same was true for Dr. King as a young leader. The same was true for John Lewis. And just thank you, Lord, for the good trouble that John Lewis helped us get into that has not only preserved, but emboldened our legacy. So those are the kinds of things that we mean when we say celebrate. Celebrate is also about engaging and educating and empowering ourselves and our future generations economically. We only need to look back at the reason that we needed to fight to end slavery, but what was holding the South so strong? It was economics. 80% of the world's cotton came from the South. If you were a cotton owner, you saw that as a boom. So you see the methodology and some of the rationalizations that were being used. However, look at what happened when we properly celebrated our freedoms. We saw what economics could do. And that's where we led to the Black Wall Street. We saw what happened when we moved into the Renaissance and we became our own supporters and promoters and developers. And so the question becomes for us today, what are we doing to restore the Black Wall Streets? What are we doing today to become our own entrepreneurs, our own business owners, our own economic controllers? And what are we doing today to empower and ensure that enough African American kids are engaged in STEM and STEM programs and the fields so that they can continue to move and have successes on an even playing field? And I would lastly say that it is important for us to have this education piece in our home and an understanding of things like the 13th Amendment, the 14th Amendment, and so on, and the Voting Rights Act. Right now, our number one civil rights challenge is this voting right preservation. We can't celebrate Juneteenth and not engage civically at every level if we're not engaging on preserving our voting rights. And that means that celebration, again, I bring you back to this conclusion. Celebration really is not just a wonderful barbecue. We have to leave that barbecue, that family gathering, with an unconditional commitment to go out, to go to work, and preserve and fight till the end for what we have truly earned and our ancestors fought so vigilantly and even gave their lives for. That to me is celebrating Juneteenth. That is honoring our rich, tremendous legacy. And that is truly empowering and emboldening future generations so that the kids that grow up in Makiki 10 years from now, 20 years from now, will look back and they'll go downtown Honolulu and they're going to say, you know something, that's the system of government that we have here. And they're going to say, you know something, it was a Black man that came to Hawaii and helped establish this. They're going to go to a schoolhouse and they're going to say, you know something, it was a Black woman that helped us establish the school systems. They are going to have that knowledge, that understanding, and more importantly, a commitment to help preserve it and pass it on to future generations. Thank you so very much for this opportunity.
Thank you, Alphonso. Nathan, if you could show some of the slides. We have some pictures of past Juneteenth events. Remember the one at Trinity? Took some pictures. Andre actually took them. Drumming, usually Juneteenth, you have a drumming session. And these are some of the drummers that were there. Dancers, you have to have dancers. You have dancers and fashion shows, wearing African clothes. Just a jubilation. And this was 2 years ago. Had a little girl there dancing around. Next slide. Okay, some more dancing to the drumming. These are some of the people celebrating in Hawaii. And they also celebrate in the mainland. Where I came from, Oahu, we always have a celebration. There's Judge Simms and Kimberly Keys and myself. Kimberly is an artist. And so we incorporate history and art. And of course, this is some of Kimberly's artwork that we're showing at the Juneteenth Day. Next, and here's some men. One of them is Andre, my husband. The other is Tommy. And so they're just sitting around talking. And I wanted to show Andre's shirt, which is a Tuskegee Airman. That's his father. And so that goes back into the history. And of course, his father was born in Lovelady, Texas, which is near Galveston, but you have to drive a couple of miles, but it's Galveston. So if Andre, if you're here, could you talk a little bit about Juneteenth and in comparison to Tuskegee, your heritage there, if you're here?
Well, Texas, like I say, is where my dad was born, is where my grandfather was born, where my grandmother was born. My grandparents graduated from Prairie View back before World War I and became school teachers. But before that, my father's people were brought into Texas through Galveston as slaves in 1840. And so we know a lot about Texas history. And 1865 in June, when General Granger came through Galveston with 2,000 Union troops and declared that slavery was over and had the Union troops to enforce that demand, that was very significant for all of us. What a lot of people don't know, though, is that Mexico abolished slavery in 1820. The second president of Mexico was an Afro-Mexican by the name of Vladimir Guerrero, who abolished slavery. So when the Texans came into Mexico, they were welcomed initially because the Mexicans had a problem with the Apaches and the Comanches, but they objected to them bringing enslaved people. The communication of Stephen Austin, the president of the Texans, is clear that with all this land, we have everything but money and we need Negroes to make money. And so Mexico was a slave-free nation that objected to the Texans bringing in slaves. And so that was a large part of what the Battle of the Alamo was about. And they don't tell us that true story. Flash forward to 1865, and here we have General Granger coming into Texas and freeing the slaves. And so my people were freed and turned out on the road with absolutely nothing. We did not take the name Rogers, the name of the enslaver. We took the name Wooten because Wooten did a service to us, and I don't know exactly what it was. But I do know that by 1900, my great-grandparents had 500 acres of Texas, and they divided that among the 4 boys. And so now we have about 3,000 acres of Texas amongst the family. I have 125 acres myself. But in honoring Juneteenth, we rewrite and correct the record of history. We assert freedom as the paramount interest rather than economic exploitation. I've learned recently that my home state, Washington State, has not only adopted the Juneteenth holiday, but they've made it a paid holiday so that people can actually take time off and recognize things. So we're in an interesting period of history, I believe, a period in which the truth is being revealed about many, many things. And fighting for freedom and equality is the American way. However, there is a dichotomy. There's always been that racist dichotomy of slavery that was code written into the Constitution. The Constitution doesn't exactly say that there's a color bar, but in 7 different places it talks about 3/5 of a person, and that it says that slavery cannot be made illegal for 20 years after the Constitution. So we have a lot of work to do. And the Trumpers, with their big lie, carrying those Confederate flags, in the Capitol on June 6th shows that we still have our work cut out to do. But all we can do is tell the truth. All we can do is tell the truth and keep our eyes on the Kluxers and the Confederates, those who are attempting to clothe themselves in patriotic trappings while invading the US government with Confederate flags. Thank you all for coming. We do indeed appreciate your efforts in getting the Juneteenth holiday passed.
Thank you. My last slide, Nathan, if you could show the last slide. There he is, Frederick Douglass. And there's his speech. What to the slave is the 4th of July? This is a speech he gave July 5th, 1852. In all of the Juneteenth celebrations I've been to, and I have been to many in different states, someone always takes the stand and reads the speech. It's not a very long speech, but it's just riveting, because here we are celebrating the 4th of July and still African Americans were enslaved. And he gave that speech and he says, what to the slave is the 4th of July? And it's all about freedom. You know, celebrating. Juneteenth is more of a holiday to me personally, because it's more about freedom than the 4th of July, which is only a celebration of victory from the British, but not for people of color. And so I would encourage everybody, if you don't go Juneteenth celebration here in Hawaii, at least turn on the TV and you will see many high school students are just giving this speech on Juneteenth Day all over the nation. We are next going to close out and ask for questions and engage in a dialogue. Any questions from anybody? I have a question. I'm going to ask it of Senator Wakai. Is there a reason why, did you find it, I'll just put it this way, did you find it easier to get the bill passed because it didn't make it a state holiday?
Yes, I think that was something that was going to trouble the bill in 2020. So we started out with the bill making it a state holiday, but found that there was a little bit of resistance, and then moved and pivoted to it being a recognized holiday. And when I say recognized holidays, state of Hawaii has 9 recognized holidays: May Day, Mother's Day, Earth Day. So now Juneteenth will be the 10th recognized holiday. But to answer your question, Daphne, yes, I think when you start talking about giving government employees a day off, then you run into all kinds of opposition that we didn't really want to deal with. And to Andre's point, I mean, maybe we can in the future, I'm sorry, I don't remember if it was Alphonso or Andre that suggested coming back and looking at this as a holiday in the future. But I think Samantha and her bill certainly paved the way for that to take place. So rather than bang our head on the wall and have the bill die in 2021 by making it a state holiday, I figure we'll take the first bite of the apple and see where we can go in the future.
Okay, it was a good strategy to at least get it in the door, get your foot in the door, and raise the consciousness of some of the legislators. Thank you, appreciate it. Anybody else have a question? You can put it in the chat if you're too shy to ask it.
Oh, Daphne, if
yes.
I can. Hi. I just wanted to share a little bit about I'm really excited about the notion of how we're going to be proceeding with the Juneteenth. And thank you, Samantha, and to all of our legislators and advocates for proceeding with this. I grew up in Chicago, Illinois, and I came here in 1979. I had never heard of Juneteenth. I learned about Juneteenth actually here in Hawaii. I just wanted to share a little bit about the history of our community's recognition. The first person who ever shared anything about Juneteenth was Mary Denise Williams, who's a active member of the Oahu Democratic Party. And she was with the Honolulu Police Department, a criminalist. And she hosted a Juneteenth gathering at Blaisdell Park. I think it might've been maybe in the late 80s or 90s. And Samantha, I think it's wonderful that what you've done to bring this forward in such a way, but so that it's recognized by the state. But it was just such an educational thing for me. And I brought my kids all the time now from that point to talk about what occurred on Juneteenth. It was just, I consider myself a fairly educated person, and it is something that I did not know about. And to have a community member just take it upon herself, like Mary did at that time, and Samantha, like you're doing at this time, someone to just take the lead and say, this is important. I want to share something that is important to our legacy and to our history. Is just a real testament to the kinds of people who are in our community who want to educate, who want to share, and who want to make certain that our history is told. So thank you, Samantha, and thank you, Mary, as well.
Okay, thank you, Sandra. Next, we have Allison Jacobs. Hey, Allison. You have to
Hey,
unmute. Hi.
Yes.
Okay.
Hi. Thank you all for this wonderful presentation, and thank you, Samantha, for spearheading this, getting this going, and to everyone else. My question is there going to be a signing ceremony? And is that going to take place on Wednesday? And is there any particular place where we could go see it happen? Or will this all be on Zoom?
I can answer that question. So there will be a signing ceremony on Wednesday at 11 a.m. Because of COVID restrictions, attendance is so very limited. But there will be a Zoom where everyone can watch it. So I don't have that Zoom link yet, but I have Hawaii for Juneteenth is a website. We have a Facebook page and Instagram. So if you follow along on any one of those three, we will be sure to announce the Zoom link the second we have it, and just make sure to blast that all over so people have a way to watch it.
In addition, I think the governor on his Facebook page will be doing it live as well. So in addition to what Samantha said, look at the governor's Facebook page for a live ceremony.
Yeah, that's better, because honestly, I'm just going to share whatever link the governor has.
Thank you. Also, I just wanted to say that there are several events going on, one in Kapiolani Park, as Akiemi mentioned, and another one at Manoa Theater. They're going to have some theatrical events in the evening at Manoa Theater, and then during the day, they have booths and food and probably drumming, I suspect, and dancing. So at least 2 events, and there could be more. So if anybody knows of another event, let us know.
I'd just like to also mention that at the Manoa Valley Theater from 2 to 5 at the event that you just mentioned, the Oahu County Democrats are going to be registering voters and enrolling folks in the Democratic Party. Anyway, stop by. We'll have a table up at the Manoa Valley Theater.
And I also have a table with my friend Catherine Takara. We're going to sell books at her Pacific Raven Press. She runs a press company. And so we'll be selling books. And I understand there may be other vendors as well. So stop on by. Okay, well, thank everybody for coming. And if you want to know more about Juneteenth, I strongly suggest, number one, as you read Frederick Douglass's speech, which is very short. And also you can go on the internet and look at various Juneteenth celebrations. I know Detroit is having a 3-day celebration for Juneteenth. So it starts on Friday and goes all the way until Sunday. And there's various events nationwide.
Just wanted to say thanks, Daphne. This was a wonderful educational event, and I'm glad to see the diversity. Also glad to see the legislative and government folks and community leaders supporting. So this is outstanding.
I would also add that there was no fighting in the Civil War in Texas. So a lot of enslavers brought their enslaved people into Texas. So when General Granger came to Texas in June 1865, there were at least 250,000 enslaved people in Texas that he freed that day. Thank you.
Hello, everybody. Thank you so much for coming and doing this. And Daphne, you're wonderful.
My pleasure. I'd like to thank all of the panelists for coming and sharing your wisdom with all of us. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank
Great
you.
job. Thank you.
Aloha.
Thank you.
Aloha.
Thank you.
Aloha, mahalo.